But now when it comes to betting on games, a lot of people need an education on it. A lot of people don't really understand when they see the numbers. What are some of the best bets we have this year for the 2022 season?
Yeah, guys, I'm happy to be on the block. I watch it all the time on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel, and I'm happy to be here from ACC Media Day in the hotel room. So I've been looking here, and I try to get some with the flavor that I've been at, right? SEC Media Day, ACC Media Day. Been to both this week, and I've actually got four for us this week, and I like these for various reasons. So I went ahead and played Virginia under 7.5 wins. A lot of people are high on Virginia because they do return quarterback Brennan Armstrong, and the schedule is pretty soft. But I don't know if people know this. They lost all 5 offensive linemen, either to graduation or to the portal, and they took a kid from Georgetown who was a very highly rated, or at least highly thought of transfer to start. He actually transferred back to Georgetown for personal reasons. I'm not trying to imply anything. I just literally don't know why. But I do know they needed that kid, and it's not easy to get transfers to Virginia due to the academics. So I don't love the fact that they lost all 5 linemen and the transfer they were counting on ain't going to be there. So under 7.5 for Virginia. They could lose a game like Georgia Tech or, a Duke. They could lose to Va Tech. They could lose maybe one of the non-conference games. Similarly, this is a decent price to pay, minus 190. So you're having to plop down 190 to net 100, but I don't see Syracuse making a bowl game. Now they have the new coaching staff on offense from Virginia, and I like Dino Babers a lot. I'm usually a believer. Their offensive line is pretty thin again, which I don't love entering the season. They are also going from something that was very run heavy now to try and run something similar to what UVA ran last year. And they actually were kind of lucky with some turnovers last year. I don't know if that's going to last. They could threaten a bowl. I could be wrong about this, but I have them more in that like 4.8 wins. So for me, under 5.5 is some value. Switching over to the SEC, I went ahead and popped LSU over 6. Now LSU on my spreadsheet, they could go like 4-8. They could go 10-2. So there's a pretty wide error bar. But one thing I think will be consistent with them is that defensive line is going to mess some people up. Right? They have a bunch of dudes there who will play on Sundays, and I know they have playmakers at receiver. I think it actually might be Miles Brennan as the starter, which is interesting because a lot of people are thinking, will it be Nussmeier? Will it be Davis? Brian Kelly historically has not rolled the dice and gone with the young talent. He's typically gone with the guy he thinks he can trust, the more veteran. And they do open with FSU in the Dome, so you may want a guy that just you think won't lose you the game potentially. I think LSU can win 7, maybe 8 games this year. And then I went ahead and took Auburn under 6.5. I think Auburn can go to a bowl potentially, but I think they have one of the worst quarterback situations in the SEC, and they lost a lot of guys at receiver. D-line's still strong. I think the secondary is okay, but they lost some important guys back there too. The schedule's tough. They do draw Penn State. So those 4 are the 4 I have for us today picked out, and I feel good about these.
Yeah, I looked through those, Bud. I love the Virginia under 7.5. I'm with you. Brennan Armstrong is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in college football. I cannot believe he didn't transfer. I mean, with all the losses that they accumulated over the offseason, I figured he was a guy that could easily leave, but hats off for him for staying and sucking it up. And I think that to me is the best bet. I think Auburn is the next best bet. I look at Auburn's schedule and could see them. I think best case scenario for them is 5-7. They're starting at the Penn State game, going down the rest of their schedule. They've got maybe one game. I think they play like Western Kentucky, I believe, right before Alabama. Like that's the only basically guaranteed win that they have. So I think Brian Harsin's in for a long year. They've got some playmakers scattered amongst their roster, but I'm with you. I don't see that happening for them. And then Syracuse, I think, is a good bet. The LSU one scares me. I'm with you. I don't know. Their schedule actually sets up nicely for them in the SEC this year. I bet you Brian Kelly wishes he could have that schedule next year instead of this year, because I think they'll be a lot better next year. But I like their D-line as well. Keyshawn Butte is one of the top receivers in the country. They got some playmakers. That's one that I would be a little bit leery about. But just curious, when you go through your analytics and you decide on who to play and just how does your system work, and what's it like, what's your typical bet for you, Bud, compared to like if these are your 4 favorite bets, let's say, do you bet more on these, or do you just keep them all the same?
Yeah. So it starts with creating a power number, right? And generally how I do it is I look at what I had last year, and then I look at coaching changes and roster attrition and roster addition. And then you basically go and you take the schedule, you plug the power numbers in, and that gives you a spread. You convert the spread to a win probability, and then you add up all those win probabilities. And, if you got 10 games at 70%, that's 7.0, right? That's going to be 7 wins. So look at that, and I compare that to the numbers that Vegas has. Obviously, we support Caesars here at 24/7, but I will say it is very important to shop around always on these, because you'll see, for instance, some places have Virginia 6.5. I'm not going to bet Virginia under 6.5 if I can bet them under 7.5. That one win might not seem like a lot, but one win is a heck of a big deal. So I converted to that. I would caution people, try not to bet too many things that are related. So I do like both the LSU and the Auburn bet, but they play each other. So if Auburn beats LSU, I could be in trouble on both. So I try not to play too many of those that are too related. Like I like Louisville over a little bit, but they play Cuse to open the year. I'm probably not going to. So you got to be cautious of things that are like implicitly double and triple betting the same thing, because they're all related. So just pick the best ones generally.
Does the juice ever scare you away on a bet, or vice versa? Does it ever give you clues on, yeah, I like this bet more because it's minus 190, or is there a certain number that triggers you to thinking, yeah, this is actually, I like this more?
Yeah, I always say bet numbers, not teams, right? You can fall in love with the laundry, but the laundry's not giving you the value. It's what the number is. And so, you need to figure out, like, hey, is it really worth paying 190 on Cuse? Well, in my estimation, yeah, some other sites or some other casinos had Cuse at 4.5. So I was willing to go and pay the minus 190 on Syracuse. 4.5. I like that a lot less. Dino's teams typically play really hard. There's not a lot of quitting him, and I think he's a good coach. It's just, that's a really hard place to win now.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the price is very important.
Gotcha.
So, Bud, give me your dark horse candidate for the Heisman. Who's a guy that you think can win the Heisman? That'll be a good bet for people, a real dark horse candidate.
So I don't have a whole lot of Heisman stuff this year. And that's not because I don't like betting the Heisman. I do, and sometimes have done well with it. But I think this is a pretty stacked, top heavy field this year. I mean, think about it. Generally, quarterbacks are going to be who you want to bet on, and it's going to be quarterbacks who are leading their team to the playoff. If it's a bad quarterback year, sometimes a running back can sneak in there. I'd like to see a defensive player win it sometime, but it's probably not going to happen anytime soon. But when you have the returning Heisman winner in Bryce, and you have CJ Stroud, who is almost certainly going to put up just insane numbers, if those guys stay healthy, a large percentage of the votes are just going to go to those two. And I'm not anxious to put my money down for 6 months to just get 2 or 3x back on it when it's not necessarily a lock. If you wanted something that could just be statistically nuts, there's some like Quinn Ewers 30-1 out there. And again, I don't think Quinn Ewers is going to win Heisman. I'm just trying to think like what could hit and be a nice payday. And you could weave a tale that Texas clicks. Maybe the defense doesn't click all that much, so they have to throw all the time. We know Sark's offense typically scores a lot of points. Maybe they win the Big 12. I don't think they're going to make the playoff or anything like that, but maybe they win the Big 12. Ewers throws it all over the yard, and 30-1 hits. But I think this is a pretty top heavy year this year, guys. Like there's not an obvious real dark horse to me.
Yeah, it seems to me.
Do you think that Will Anderson could be a good bet, Blake? I know we talked a little bit about this the other day off camera. Could Will Anderson be a good heavy bet for people?
I hope so. I've got a lot of money on him winning the Heisman. I just think 25-1, he's a great dark horse candidate. It's unlikely that a defensive player wins it, especially with Alabama and Ohio State's firepower they have on offense. My money is on either an Ohio State player or an Alabama player is going to win the Heisman this year. It could be, 3 guys on each team, maybe more. But I think if there's a lot of mouths to feed on those 2 teams, I think if Will Anderson does what he did last year and even improves on it, and let's say, Henderson and Gibbs at Alabama are running for a lot of yards and taking away a lot of the passing yards for Stroud and Bryce Young, I think, there's a chance. I don't think it's a great chance, but I'm going to put some of my own money on it just because of what a dominant player he is defensively.
Now, Bud, what is the biggest sucker bet this year?
Biggest sucker bet. Ooh, okay. I saw some like Alabama to make the playoff at like -300, and I would rather just play them to win the SEC if I had to. I'd rather just play them to win the SEC at -145. This is where, to get back to Blake's question about does price matter? It absolutely matters. You need to figure out what's more value. Now, granted, could Bama make the playoff without winning the SEC? Yes, and indeed they have in prior years, right? The hell, they won the whole thing one year without winning their own conference. But there's a difference between being pretty sure that like Bama or Ohio State are going to win the title and thinking there's actually value on it. Because you know who else thinks that? Me and every other guy out there with a spreadsheet, and probably the guy behind the counter who's setting the numbers that we're betting. Like everybody's pretty sure that those guys are going to be the Heisman. So I was, or the national title. I would say there's not a whole lot of value on taking those favorites like that.
Yeah, I feel like Bama and Ohio State, picking them to win a natty, you're not going to get a lot of value from them. And then again, Bryce Young and CJ Stroud to win the Heisman. It's like the odds aren't like the odds are too good that they'll win it. So you're not going to get a lot of investment back on. I think you got to dig a little bit deeper. I'd rather take Travion Henderson as a running back than I would CJ Stroud, just because of the value you're going to get.
Now, I got a question for Blake. Can I ask Blake a question? I know I'm not the host.
Yeah.
Can Will Anderson win the Heisman if Bryce Young stays healthy?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Bryce Young threw for a lot of yards last year. I don't think Alabama's DNA this year is going to be to throw the ball as much as they had last year. I think that they've got a nice stable of running backs. I think they can help their offensive line out by maybe calling a little bit more of a balanced game. I mean, you watch Ohio State's offense, and they do a really great job of keeping the offensive line gives them a chance to succeed. They've got good players, but you can't just throw the ball every play like Alabama did and expect to have a dominant offensive line. So I think so. I think, like I said, both of those teams are loaded offensively. And I think if Will Anderson just being snubbed last year, I think is going to help him, one. And I think if he can get off to a big start, I mean, he's going to do what he does. Alabama's defense is going to be even better this year. So he's probably going to be, statistically, he could even be better, which is hard to imagine. I think they have a really weak home schedule. They play a few teams at home that I can't imagine he's going to play a whole lot in. So I don't know if those stats will be, as crazy as they could be. But if he shines in the big games in the national spotlight and makes a big impact, then I think, heck yeah, he's got a chance. Not a great chance, but a chance.